Princess Lyrael woke before sunrise, her heart pounding like a drum in a quiet hall. She lay on cold marble, her breath forming small clouds in the still air. Outside, the sky held the faint glow of two moons sinking behind distant peaks. Today was the day she had feared all her life. Today the High Council would cast her out of Arsen's crystal city. Today she would lose the only home she had ever known. She rose and stepped into the long corridor. Her feet made no sound on polished stone. Tapestries of past rulers, strong, proud warriors lined the walls. Lyrael paused before a tapestry of her mother, Queen Serene. The queen stood tall, sword strapped at her hip, eyes bright with purpose. Lyrael's shoulders sagged beneath, her simple exile robe. She touched the embroidered hem, tracing the thinnest gold thread. She knew she did not measure up, but she had hoped for mercy. In the grand hall, the council waited. 12 figures in heavy robes of amethyst and silver sat behind a long dais. Their faces were stern, lips pressed together. Lyrael bowed at the dais's edge. She felt every noble gaze, cold as the glass sands beyond the city walls. Chief, Consul Ardon cleared his throat. His voice echoed wide and empty. For generations, our line has stood strong. Our people have thrived because our leaders mastered both mind and body. Princess Lyrael, born of royal blood, has shown neither strength nor wisdom. Lyrael held her head high. Her voice trembled only once. Your voices speak truth, honored council. She waited for the final blow. A guard stepped forward with a small pedestal. On it lay her family's ancient sigil, a carved gemstone, in the shape of a rising star. The gem glowed softly with inner lights. Lyrael's gift from her mother meant to guide her, now felt heavy in her chest. She reached out with gentle fingers. Chief Consul Arden said, by decree of the High Council, we strip you of title and blood rights. You are banished from Arsen. This sigil, the mark of your birth, will remain in our vault until the day you can prove yourself worthy. He nodded to the guard. The guard's hand closed around the gem. Sparks of light winked out. Lyrael's shoulders shook as she watched her heritage vanish. A hollow silence followed. She wanted to speak, to plead, but even the words felt weak. She bowed deeply. When she stood, the dais doors opened on either side. 2 guards stepped forward and bowed their heads. One took her by the elbow. The other carried a small leather satchel, the only thing she was allowed to keep. Lyrael lifted the satchel, feeling its worn strap slip through her fingers. Inside were a few garments, her mother's journal, and a small silver locket. The guards led her through the hall's great archway. The violet mists of dawn lay across the courtyard. Towers of clear crystal caught the light and threw rainbows in every direction. The air smelled of night flowers and dew. Lyrael took a deep breath, as if she could anchor herself to this final memory. Citizens gathered behind low walls, their faces hidden by veils. Some whispered, some stared without pity. None offered comfort. Outside the city gates lay the outlands, a stretch of glass sands and jagged rocks. Here, no city lights shone, and no walls kept danger away. Her guards stopped at the threshold. They neither smiled nor looked away. The lead guard spoke softly. Princess, beyond this point you walk alone. No Arsenite may aid or shelter you. He bowed. The second guard handed her a small scroll sealed with the council's signet. Lyrael accepted it with shaking hands. She opened the gate. The cold wind of the outland swept over her. Glass sands glinted like broken glass under pale moons. In the distance, spines of black rock rose like jagged teeth. She clasped the scroll and folded it into her satchel. Then, without a backward glance, she stepped onto the sands. Each step sank slightly. She felt the weight of her exile in every muscle. She remembered her childhood lessons. Sword drills at dawn, strategy sessions at noon, debates on politics at dusk. She had flunked them all. She had tried, but she was always too slow, too soft, too cautious. In the city, such faults were death. Sentences for a ruler. Here they might be her undoing. She walked until her legs ached. The sky grew pale blue as the suns rose. Sweat beaded on her brow. Yet in her chest a small spark of something new glimmered. Determination. She could not change the past. She could not undo her failings. But she could survive this day. She could learn. As the first sun climbed high, she saw a stone outcrop ahead. She reached it at noon, collapsed in its shade, and rested. From a hidden pocket of her robe, she drew her mother's journal. The pages were worn, edges frayed. Her mother had written of kindness, service, and the true power of a ruler. Lyrael's fingers brushed her mother's careful script. She read a line she knew by heart. A leader's strength comes from the hearts she guards, not from the steel she wields. She closed the journal and looked out at the desert. She felt small and alone, but not helpless. The locket in her satchel, filled with sand from her home garden, felt warm against her side. She slipped it around her neck. It was a link to who she once was, and to who she might become. By late afternoon, she rose and faced the sands again. No patrol came to stop her. No howl of beast or crack of rock menace interrupted her. Only, the winds carried her forward. She walked until the city was a distant glimmer of crystal towers on the horizon. Her tears dried in the desert air. Night fell, and Lyrael made camp under the twin moons. She built a small shelter of rocks and a thin blanket from her satchel. She drank sparingly from a water flask. The stars above Arson burned bright and clear. She studied their constellations, learned as a child to find her mother's favorite star. Tonight it was just another dot in the sky. Yet Lyrael felt the first quiet strength rising in her chest. She was alone, but she was free. Tomorrow, she would face the Outlands again. She did not know what lay ahead, but for the first time she believed she could endure it. With the last flicker of moonlight, she closed her eyes and whispered into the night air, "I will find a way." And so began Princess Lyrael's journey beyond exile, where weakness would become the seed of her greatest strength. Princess Lyrael rose with the dawn, the chill of night still clinging to her shoulders. Her body ached from the day before, the endless walk across the glass sands, the burning sun on her back. Yet her spirit, fragile though it was, urged her onward. She clutched her mother's faded journal in one hand and her silver locket in the other, letting their weight anchor her as she navigated the rolling dunes. By mid-morning, the shifting sands revealed a shape on the horizon, a skeletal frame of metal and glass half buried. Lyrael's heart beat faster. She had heard tales of the old research stations that once floated among the stars, cataloging new worlds. Each station was equipped with power cores, hydroponic labs, and living quarters, until disaster struck and they were abandoned. She approached with caution. The station's outer hull was cracked in places, and vines of a strange blue moss curled around exposed steel. There was no sign of life. Until a voice rang out. "Hey, who's there?" Lyrael froze. The voice was curt, human, an accent she did not recognize. She stepped around a broken panel and found the speaker, a tall woman with dark hair, pulled into a tight ponytail. She wore a faded uniform bearing the insignia of Earth's Exploration Corps. At her side lay a compact energy rifle, though it was set to non-lethal. The woman's eyes glinted with wary intelligence. "Identify yourself," the woman called. Lyrael's pulse hammered in her ears. She had years of royal training, diplomacy, protocol, etiquette, but none of that prepared her for this moment. She steadied her voice. "I am Lyrael of House Arson. I am exiled." The human lowered her rifle a fraction. "I'm Captain Mara Patel," she said, her voice softer but guarded. "You're the exiled princess?" She shook her head. "Odd place for royalty." Lyrael bowed her head. "I have nowhere else to go." Mara studied her. The station's wind-swept corridors creaked as the twin suns heated the metal. "Well," the captain said, "we can't have royalty dying out here." She gestured. "Come on inside." We'll talk. Lirael followed Mara through a half-collapsed airlock into a long hallway. The air was thin but breathable. Broken. Lights flickered overhead. At the end of the hall, Mara waved her forward. This used to be the lab. Mara swept her arm at a row of overturned workstations and shattered glass tanks. We got here 3 months ago. The original crew vanished. I'm on a solo mission to reboot the systems and finish their work. Lirael picked her way through the debris. She recognized some of the lab equipment: nutrient injectors, climate regulators, genetic sequencers. In the journal's margins, her mother had described similar plants back on Arson, prized for their healing sap. Lirael felt a sudden pulse of curiosity. Mara noticed. You know your flora? She asked, brow raised. Lirael nodded. My people kept gardens in the palace. I studied their needs. The captain's eyes narrowed. So, you're not as useless as they said. Lirael looked away. I have much to learn. Mara crossed her arms. Silence stretched between them until patrol drones overhead whined, a distant low thrum growing louder. Both women froze. Outside, a dust storm roared across the desert, sand whipping against the station's hull. Mara cursed. This station isn't built for those storms unless we seal it properly. The West Wing's bulkhead is busted. Lirael's heart pounded. What can I do? Mara's gaze was sharp. Help me secure the panels. Hand me that wrench. They worked side by side as the storm's howl intensified. Lirael's sleeve caught on a jagged shard of metal. She winced but kept moving, passing tools to Mara. The captain's precise instructions echoed through the corridor. Align the brace here, tighten that bolt. Good. Now swing that panel into place. Lirael pushed the damaged bulkhead free and slid it into the frame. Grit from the storm snuck through every crack. Mara hammered at the edges until the metal sealed with a satisfying click. Then she activated the repair drones she'd reprogrammed. The storm battered the station. Inside, lights dimmed. Lirael and Mara stood close to the sealed doorway, breathing hard. You're pretty handy for royalty, Mara said at last. Lirael brushed sweat from her brow. I had to learn or I would have died years ago. Mara studied her, expression unreadable. Then she nodded. Come on, I'll show you the common room. They moved deeper into the station, past corridors, lined with faded murals of earlier explorers. The common room was a small lounge with a half-functional replicator and a projection table. A handful of potted plants, survivors of the biodome collapse, trembled in weak gravity. Mara tapped a console. I'm happy to evacuate if this storm gets worse, but I'd rather save this place and finish the research. She turned to Lirael. Want to help? Lirael hesitated. She had no formal training in technology, but the equipment here reminded her of her mother's journals. I'll try. Mara handed her a data pad. We're cataloging local plant genomes. This fern species, Kenial, has strong regenerative properties but needs precise humidity. I need data on how much moisture these spores absorb in different conditions. Lirael studied the datapad's interface. The buttons looked alien, but the diagrams of spore cells were familiar. She recalled lessons in Royal Academy, biology, chemistry, botany. She tapped numbers into the simulation protocols, adjusting humidity levels in tiny increments. Data streamed across the screen. Mara peered over her shoulder. Not bad. Lirael's cheeks warmed. It feels right. Mara nodded. Strength isn't just muscle or swordsmanship. It's knowing how to bend circumstances in your favor. Lirael's heart fluttered. She had not heard words like these within the palace walls. Royal tutors prized tactics, politics, duels. Yet here in this broken station, wisdom and patience counted more. Over the next hours they worked in tandem, Mara repairing power conduits, Lirael analyzing sensor data to predict storm damage. Outside, the winds howled, but inside, the station hummed with renewed life. Holographic displays flickered too, life corridors glowed, and the biodome's automated sprinklers misted the potted plants, At last, the storm passed. Red and orange skies illuminated the horizon as the twin suns dipped. Mara and Lirael stood side by side in the cleared common room. "You did well," Mara said, offering a rare smile. "You have more strength than you think." Lirael met her gaze. For the first time since her exile, she felt pride instead of shame. "Thank you, Captain Patel." Mara shrugged. "Just call me Mara. You're no longer princess here. You're just another person trying to survive." Lirael nodded slowly. The word person felt strange on her tongue. No titles, no ceremonies. Free of expectations, she looked at Mara and saw not a stranger, but a teacher and ally. Night fell fully, and the station's lights shone through broken windows. Slim tendrils of the blue moss glowed under the artificial lamps, casting gentle luminescence on the walls. The scent of damp earth and alien blooms filled the air. Mara poured 2 mugs of synthesized coffee from the replicator. She handed one to Lirael. They sat at the projection table sipping in companionable silence. At last, Lirael spoke. "You've been here months. Why didn't you leave?" Mara tapped the table and brought up a holomap of the desert. "Because something about the local ecosystem intrigued me. These plants could heal illnesses we still struggle with on Earth. I chose to stay, even when supplies ran low. I believed in the mission." Lirael thought of her own exile, how her people had cast her aside for her supposed weakness. Here was someone who chose purpose over comfort, someone not born to privilege, but who showed courage in the face of hardship. Lirael set her mug down. "I want to help. Not because I have to, but because I believe in this too." Mara's dark eyes softened. "Then welcome aboard, Lirael." They clinked their mugs together. Outside, the night air held the promise of calm. Inside, 2 unlikely allies shared warmth and hope. Princess and captain, exile and explorer, they rested under broken ceilings and glowing moss. Each had something to learn. Lirael, the true meaning of strength. Mara, that sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected places. The station creaked, alive again, and as they looked toward the far corridor, where data cores blinked and dormant research waited to be rediscovered, they knew the real journey was just beginning. Princess Lirael awoke to the soft hum of the station's life support systems. The faint glow of bioluminescent moss along the corridor walls lit her path as she made her way toward the hydroponic dome. Each morning, the air smelled faintly, of damp earth and alien blooms, a scent she had come to love. She paused at the dome's entrance and breathed deeply, remembering her first painful steps on the glass sands. Now, stepping into this new world felt more like returning home. Inside the dome, rows of metal benches held clear trays of soil and roots. Strange ferns and orchids, their petals tinged violet, grew under artificial lamps. Lirael gently ran a finger along a fern frond, noting how its spores glowed faintly in the low light. She recalled Mara's instructions. "These plants respond to kindness. Speak to them, tend them carefully, and they will flourish." At first she thought the captain mocked her, but now she saw the wisdom. Plants, like people, needed care. Mara entered carrying a datapad and a small tray of seedlings. She smiled at Lirael's thoughtful expression. "Ready for today's experiment?" she asked. Lirael nodded. Mara explained that they would test how different light wavelengths affected the plant's growth. She adjusted the lamp's settings on the console. "Blue light increases chlorophyll production," Mara said. "Red light helps with flowering. We need both in balance." Lirael watched the number scroll across the screen. She felt confident enough now to suggest adjustments. "What if we alternate red and blue in short cycles? The plants might absorb both benefits without stress." Mara looked impressed. "Let's try it." Together they programmed the lights to shift every 30 minutes. Over the next hour, they monitored sensors that tracked leaf thickness, root strength, and oxygen output. When the results showed improved growth, Lirael felt a thrill of pride. She realized that knowledge and patience could be as powerful as swords. As the day wore on, the small station crew drifted into the dome. A technician named Sorrow approached Lirael with a worried frown. "Princess Lirael?" he asked, using her old title out of habit. "The water circulator is acting up. The humidity is dropping fast." Lirael's heart skipped. Without enough moisture, the seedlings could die. She remembered her mother's words in the journal. A ruler protects life with every choice. Taking a deep breath, Lirael set aside her doubts. She led Sorrow to the control room. The monitor showed a pipe leak in the lower chamber. The patch kit was locked behind a panel that required technical codes. Mara had taught her how to override security protocols. Lirael entered the codes carefully. The panel clicked open. She and Sorrow repaired the leak together, sealing the pipe with fast-curing resin. Within minutes, humidity levels climbed back to normal. Sorrow clapped her on the shoulder. "Well done," he said. Lirael allowed herself a small smile. She felt useful in a way she never had in the palace. That night, Lirael and Mara sat in the common room, 2 mugs of steaming tea between them. Outside, the desert winds had calmed, and the stars shone bright. Mara leaned back and sighed. "I grew up in a world torn by conflict," she said quietly. "Earth had wars over water, over land, over beliefs. We learned that brute force only brought more pain." She traced a pattern on the table. "I joined the Exploration Corps hoping to find new solutions, not new battles." Lirael listened, imagining the wars Mara described. Lirael opened, her mother's journal turning to a page filled with tight, neat writing. She read aloud. "True strength lies in understanding. A leader must listen more than she commands." Mara's eyes softened. "Your mother was wise," she said. Lirael closed the book and looked at the human beside her. "You have taught me much more," she replied. Their hands brushed over the journal. In that simple touch, Lirael felt the bonds of friendship and trust. Over the next days, Lirael poured herself into the research. She used her knowledge of palace gardens to help train the crew in plant care. She created charts of watering schedules and nutrient mixes. Crew members who once saw her as a fragile exile now sought her advice. She taught them how to read subtle changes in leaf color and how to adjust airflow for sensitive roots. Each time she saw a plant flourish, she felt her own confidence grow. One afternoon, an alarm blared through the station. The biodome's main generator was failing. Lights flickered and the temperature began to drop. Lirael felt her chest tighten. If the dome cooled too much, the plants would freeze. She dashed to the control panel and studied the diagnostic code. Mara arrived moments later. "I'll handle the generator," she said. "You coordinate with the dome's systems." Lirael nodded. She accessed the station's central AI and rerouted emergency power to the dome. She monitored temperature gauges, opening vents to release cold air from other modules so more warmth could return to the plant chamber. She barked clear instructions to technicians over the comlink. "Pump coolant off the grid, redirect heating elements, seal non-essential bulkheads." Her voice held authority, calm and steady. Within minutes, the generator stabilized and the dome's temperature climbed back into the safe range. The plants trembled with relief under the gentle mist of the sprayers. Crew members cheered, and Lirael felt a surge of emotion. She had saved the very life support system she helped cultivate. No one called her weak that day. Later, Mara found Lirael in the hydroponic dome, studying a new plant species. "You did it," Mara said softly. Lirael turned and smiled. "We did it," she corrected. Mara nodded. "You are not just learning strength, Lirael. You are becoming the kind of leader your world needs." Princess Lirael stood among the glowing green leaves and bioluminescent moss. She felt a warmth in her chest that no exile could ever take away. Strength, she now understood, was not measured by muscle or sword, but by compassion, wisdom, and the courage to act when it mattered most. As she reached out to tend another fragile seedling, she knew her journey had only just begun, and that she had at last found the true meaning of strength. A thin line of violet dawn light crept across the floor of the hydroponic dome as Princess Lirael worked beside Captain Mara Patel. The station hummed with renewed energy, and Lirael's thoughts drifted homeward for the first time in weeks. She pictured the crystal spires of Arsin's capital, the marble halls, and the stern faces of the High Council. She wondered if they remembered her at all. Suddenly, an alert pinged from the communications console. Mara glanced at the screen, frowning. "That's a direct holo-transmission from Arsin," she said. "They rarely contact us unless something urgent has happened." She tapped a sequence of commands and projected a shimmering image above the table. The High Council chamber appeared, 12 cloaked figures seated beneath grand arches, their solemn forms reflected in polished floors. At the center stood Chief Consul Arden, his voice echoing through the station. "Princess Lyrael," he began, "your exile we accepted in silence. Yet today, we face a crisis that threatens all. Life within our capital's biodome network. Unstable energy surges have damaged the climate controls. Without immediate repair, our people and our gardens will perish." The consul's voice wavered only slightly. "We demand your assistance. Show us if you are worthy of your birthright." Lyrael's heart thundered. She had never spoken to the council except in shame. Now they asked for her help. She swallowed hard and squared her shoulders. "I will help," she replied steadily. She turned to Mara. "We must act quickly. Can we tap into their systems from here?" Mara studied the console. "Yes, but the link is old and encrypted. It'll take time to override." She paused. "Are you sure you want to do this? If you fail, they may condemn you forever." Lyrael met Mara's steady gaze. "Then I must succeed." Within minutes, the station's AI connected to Arsin's climate network. Lyrael and Mara pored over cascading lines of code and holographic schematics of capital biodomes, giant glass domes housing forests, lakes, and healing gardens. The problem was clear. An energy conduit had overloaded, causing feedback loops that threatened to freeze half the city or burn the domes from within. Mara's fingers flew across the console's interface. "We can reroute power from this secondary grid," she said, "but you need to guide the dome's internal regulators. They use an older system, something you might understand better." She gestured to Lyrael. "You've studied Arsin engineering more than I have." Lyrael inhaled deeply. Inside her mind swirled memories of palace lessons, the intricate diagrams, the arcane symbols of power flows, the lectures on balancing energy crystals. She had dismissed them as irrelevant then. Now they were her only hope. She traced a glowing line in the projection. "These regulators here, they need a negative feedback loop to stabilize the core. Send a reverse signal from grid 9 to grid 3, but only for 15 seconds. Then cut power to the local reactor to reset its phase." Mara nodded and relayed the commands. The hollow projection trembled as energy lines flashed from blue to red. The counselors watched in tense silence. Within moments, the projector showed the feedback loop stabilizing. Lyrael held her breath as the simulated temperature gauge climbed back into the safe zone. Chief Consul Arden's face brightened for the first time. "You have done it," he said with awe. "You possess wisdom we denied you." A murmur rose among the council members. They leaned forward, their cloaks rustling like wings. "Return home at once," Arden commanded. "We will honor you as the savior of our capital." Lyrael's chest swelled with relief, but she remained calm. "I will return," she said. "But first," she turned to Mara, "we must monitor the real domes. Let's confirm stability before I leave." Mara tapped the final commands. Data streamed in, temperature normals restored, structural support secure, air quality optimal. The crisis was over. Lyrael exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since exile. She felt a new strength, a quiet confidence rooted in knowledge and compassion. Here on this distant station, she had used her gifts to save her people. She no longer feared their judgment. She had earned their respect. Mara placed a hand on Lyrael's arm. "You did more than save gardens," she said softly. "You proved that leadership comes from heart and mind. Your people will remember today." Lyrael smiled at her friend. "Thank you." she whispered. The hollow projection faded. Silence hung in the dome like a held breath. Then the station's corridors rang with the sound of cheering. Crew members poured in, their faces alight with excitement. Soro, the technician, raised his voice. The princess did it. She saved Arson. Lyrael waved humbly as they surrounded her in a circle of gratitude. That evening, as the twin moons rose, Lyrael packed her satchel. She folded the station's maps and data drives carefully, knowing they were precious gifts from Mara's crew. She secured her mother's journal and the silver locket against her heart. Outside, the desert air was cool and still. Mara joined her by the airlock. "Are you ready?" she asked. Lyrael nodded. "Yes. I go back not as a weak exile, but as someone my people need." She offered her hand. Mara clasped it firmly. "Then go," the captain said. "Show them who you really are." Lyrael stepped onto the small shuttle that would carry her across the stars. As the ship hummed to life, she looked back at the station, its lights glowing like distant fireflies in the desert night. She felt a pang of sadness to leave, but also a thrill of purpose. Ahead lay her home, the city that once rejected her. The shuttle ascended through layers of atmosphere. Lyrael watched the station shrink below until only a glimmer remained. She turned inward, thinking of Mara's words. Strength comes from empathy, ingenuity, and courage. She realized that her exile had been the greatest lesson of all. When the shuttle docked at Arson's orbital station, a reception team waited. They bowed deeply as she emerged, and a holobeam transmitted her arrival to the capital. Banners unfurled in every district, and citizens gathered to welcome her as a hero. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and Lyrael stepped onto solid platform, feeling weight in her limbs and pride in her chest. News drones buzzed overhead, projecting her image across the sky. Children pointed in wonder. Elderly nobles whispered, "Behind hands." The High Council's message of hope echoed through city squares. "Princess Lyrael returns to guide us." As she passed through the crystal gates, Lyrael lifted her chin. She held no sword, carried no royal sigil, only her satchel, her journal, and the lessons she learned among the stars. She walked with steady steps, each one a promise to her. People to lead with wisdom, compassion, and the unshakable strength she found in unexpected places. And so, the princess once exiled for weakness stood again in her rightful place, strong, wise, and ready to shape a new future for Arson. Morning light spread across the capital of Arson, painting the crystal towers in soft gold. Princess Lyrael stood at the palace balcony, dressed not in heavy royal robes but in simple silken garments of pale blue, the color of hope. Around her neck hung her mother's silver locket, and at her side the leather satchel of her journey. She watched the crowds gather below in the great plaza, their faces alight with curiosity and expectation. A soft murmur rose as the High Council arrived, led by Chief Consul Arden. He wore the ceremonial robes of office, but his eyes held respect rather than disdain. Behind him stood Mara Patel, Earth's envoy, in a uniform trimmed with Arson's sigil. Lyrael's heart swelled at the sight of her friend and ally. Today was not about crowns or bloodlines. It was about a new path for two worlds. When the plaza quieted, Lyrael stepped forward. She unfolded a rolled scroll, embossed with the Arson and Earth emblems entwined. Raising her voice so all could hear, she spoke slowly with steady warmth. "People of Arson, nobles of the High Council, honored guests from Earth, I once returned as the exile you feared weak. But out there among the stars, I found my strength in compassion, knowledge, and unity." She paused, meeting each face in the crowd. "I propose a new royal mandate, that Arson and Earth work together, sharing skills, research, and friendship." A hush fell. Then whispers passed through the audience. Some nobles exchanged doubtful glances, yet in the front row, young gardeners and healers from the biodomes nodded eagerly. They remembered how Lyrael had saved their world with science, not swords. The princess continued. Let us create joint research stations across the stars. Let our engineers and botanists teach each other. Let our children learn Earth's languages and Earth's children learn ours. We will forge a future where no exile exists, only partners in progress. Chief Consul Arden rose to speak. Lyrael held her breath. Princess, he began, your words carry truth and promise. I, for one, will support this alliance. He turned to the council members. Who among us will stand against wisdom and unity? One by one, robes nodded. Even the most traditional nobles could not deny the courage she had shown. A chorus of assent rose and the plaza erupted in cheers. Mara stepped forward and bowed deeply to Lyrael, then stood and addressed the crowd in clear earth speech. Friends of Arson, I am honored to be your envoy. Together we will explore distant worlds, cure illnesses, and share art, music, and stories. May this be the first of many steps toward a brighter tomorrow. She smiled at Lyrael, whose eyes shone with gratitude. That afternoon, the first Council of the Arson-Earth Alliance convened in the palace's grand solar chamber. Holographic star maps glowed above a circular table. Lyrael, seated between Arden and Mara, presided with calm confidence. Plans for the first joint station, a research outpost on the verdant moon Calligra, filled the agenda. Arson engineers offered crystal synthesis techniques. Earth scientists contributed data on robotic harvesters. Each proposal wove together their strengths. When debate grew heated, some Arson delegates feared cultural loss. Lyrael raised her hand. She spoke of the blue moss in the desert station, whose glow had guided her through darkness. Our cultures will not fade, she said gently, but grow richer through exchange. Just as that moss thrived under alien lights, so will our traditions bloom in new soil. Silence followed, then nods of agreement. Outside the palace, work crews prepared the city for the Alliance's first celebration. Streets were draped with banners of Arson's rising star intertwined with Earth's blue globe. Musicians tuned crystal harps and human wind instruments. Chefs in both styles blended spices and fruits in communal feasts. Lyrael and Mara walked among the crowds, tasting sweet melon slices and laughing as children from both worlds chased one another. As dusk fell, the celebration reached its peak in the central gardens. Lanterns drifted overhead, casting multicolored lights on fountains shaped like double helixes. Lyrael gave Mara a gentle nudge. Look at them, she said. All those children. No titles, no borders, just joy. Mara's eyes glistened. This is what we fought for, she whispered. Later on the palace rooftop, Lyrael and Mara stood side by side, gazing at the two moons rising above the horizon. The air smelled of night flowers and distant rain. Lyrael traced the line of her mother's sigil on her locket. I never imagined I could stand here like this, she said softly. All because a human showed me what strength truly is. Mara placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. You showed the universe what it means to lead with heart and mind, she replied. Your strength inspired us all. They stood in comfortable silence, two worlds joined by a bond of friendship. In the weeks that followed, the Arson Earth stations on Calligra opened doors to joint teams of scientists, artists, and students. Soldiers from neither world patrolled the corridors, only teachers and gardeners, scholars and medics. Reports came back of new medicines developed from Calligra's fungi and of music composed by human and Arsonite artists together. Each success reinforced the Alliance's promise. Back on Arson, the palace gardens grew even more lush, nurtured by Earth's hydroponic methods blended with Arson's crystal fertilizers. Visitors from distant star systems arrived, curious to witness this model of peaceful cooperation. Princess Lyrael welcomed them, her simple garments now a symbol of her humble strength. She walked through the blooming arches, greeting old friends and new allies alike. Months after her return, Lyrael addressed the graduating class of the new Interstellar Academy in the capital's grand amphitheater. Before her sat young Arsonites and Earth children, eager faces bright under a rainbow of glass lanterns. She smiled and spoke. You are proof that we are stronger together. You will carry our partnership into the far reaches of space. Remember, that strength is not the force you wield, but the hope you share." Applause rolled across the steps like gentle waves. That night, Lirael slipped away to the royal greenhouse overlooking the city. She paused under her mother's favorite tree, its leaves silver and soft to the touch. She closed her eyes and felt the gentle hum of life all around her. Laughter from distant streets, the whisper of wind through crystal spires, the soft glow of lanterns. She opened her hand to reveal the carved gemstone of her restored sigil, now placed on her desk as a reminder of past lessons. She lifted her gaze to the stars. Out there, beyond Arsen's atmosphere, lay the next adventure. But for now, she was home. No longer an exile, but a leader forged by compassion, wisdom, and unity. And with Mara by her side, she knew they would face every challenge together, guiding two worlds toward a future where strength and kindness walked hand in hand.